Alright, hello everyone again. This is Group 2. Today we're going to be talking about project management and a couple things associated with it. Alright, so first off, what exactly is project management? Well, project management is the practice of initiating, planning, executing, controlling, and closing the work of a team to achieve specific goals and meet specific success criteria at a specified time. The reason why it's important is there's a lot of things happening throughout a project. Some are dependent on each other, so for one thing to happen, another thing already has to have happened. And then if issues arise, they could cost the company a lot of money. So if things don't go as planned, they could technically lose out, so it's always good to make sure you are prepared. So you can kind of break it down into 5 factors that really make a successful project for project management. The first one is smart people. So this is very important because, of course, without the right team in place, really anything can fall apart. So you want to make sure you have a good team to start off. The next one is smart planning. So you want to make sure you have a very elaborate and comprehensive planning process. You want to make sure that you plan it out. You want to lay it all out. You want to see it from start to finish before you even begin, or else it might just even be a train wreck before you even start. Next one would be open communication. So the project manager, he wants to make sure that he talks to everyone, make sure that you get your information from everywhere. So make sure everyone on the team really knows what they're doing, who's doing what. That goes back to the smart people again. You just want to make sure that everyone's talking to each other. Number 4 is careful risk management. So when doing a project, a lot will not go as planned. So you must have a plan for handling issues. So if you can try to minimize the risk and stuff, basically that'll just help as well. And then up next would be strong project closure. So a proper closure is important because it doesn't continue to consume resources after the project is done. So you want to make sure when you reach your end goal that you close it. That way, like I said, you're not wasting those resources again and you're not like dragging the project out. So with project management, there's also something called scope creep. So basically this is something that, like the name says, can just really creep up on you, where a small problem at the very beginning can snowball into a really big problem at the end of the project and could really screw up the whole project. So scope creep is small changes to projects. They're often difficult to detect, but they may build to large changes that cause the project problems. Scope creep, like I said, is common early in the project, so it can start off really small and then snowball bigger and bigger until it's just kind of out of their hands. It can be caused by client requirements for additional features, new technology, poorly defined requirements / design, unidentified assumptions / risks. And the scope creep can alter the project's organization's cash flow requirements, the project resource requirements, the time to deliver, and also the quality of the project too. And then lastly, it can also have a flow-on impact on other projects. So you want to make sure that you get it taken care of, try to get it eliminated in one project, or it could slowly creep up at another project that you are starting, and then it could just be a whole nother problem again. It could snowball right back to a bigger problem that it can really just keep carrying on to other projects too. So here's some startling statistics that go with scope creep as well. So 32, that's the percent of all projects that were successful. That means they were delivered on time, on budget, and then with the required features and functions as well. 44%, those were the projects that were late, that they were over budget, and or with less than the required features and functions. Then lastly, 24, so that was the percent that was failed. So basically these projects were canceled prior to completion or delivered and never really used, so they were just scrapped entirely. We also have this thing called feature creep. So this is closely related to scope creep as well. So feature creep is the result of team members arbitrarily adding features and functions to the deliverable that they think the client would want to have. So basically you start out with the plan, you say this is how it's going to get done, and then when you're going through each step, maybe your team kind of says, well, I think we should add this, or I think they'll like this. So basically you're kind of losing sight of what the original client or customer had in mind. So it's not really what you had in mind at the very beginning, and when it comes to the final part of it, when it's all finished, maybe the client or the customer, they won't be happy because it's not exactly what they thought they were going to be looking for. So of course there is a way to control scope and feature creep. So you want to make sure that your scope is well defined. You want to make sure you have a risk matrix to help define contingency. You want to make sure you have a pre-planned backup on the high-risk scope options. You also want to make sure you have a rigid process that must be followed. And then lastly, this is probably the most important one. You want to make sure that you set up a flowchart that does not allow the project manager to be overlooked. So to the right over there, you can kind of really just see like the diagram. So basically, if someone requests something or wants to add something, you want to make sure it goes directly back to the project manager, because the project manager will have the whole thing well defined right at the beginning. Like we said, with the careful planning, you want to make sure it's all laid out. So if that new scope or anything does not fit with the original plan, the project manager hopefully can catch that to kind of help control scope and the feature creep too as well. So you also want to make sure you can minimize risk. So that's where risk management comes in. So it's important for project managers to identify, track, and mitigate risk to avoid cost and schedule overruns. So you want to make sure you start and finish on time. You want to make sure that you be proactive. So at the beginning of a project, it's really easy to ignore risk. It's really easy to also procrastinate dealing with risk. So that's why I said, like with the snowball, it could be something really small in the beginning. Your group or your team can choose to ignore it. And then, like I said, risks do not go away by themselves. So that's that next point right there. So that ties in where basically it'll just come back to bite you in the butt at the very end, and it would probably be even bigger than it was at the beginning. So you want to make sure that you try to take care of them first. So be proactive and really try to hone down on them. And then lastly, don't be afraid to escalate risk to your sponsors, but make sure you avoid escalating trivial issues too. So you got to be very careful with the way that you do it. But like I said, don't be afraid to escalate it as well to the sponsors. And then kind of continuing from our last slide. So some studies report a 90% decrease in project problems through the risk of use management. It really puts the project manager in control of the problems that are likely to occur in the future. Then it also allows, again, the project manager to be proactive. So kind of like the big takeaway here is that you really want to make sure that you have a good project manager from the very get-go, from the very beginning, because a good project manager will be able to spot these things, and then they'll also have good risk management too. So hopefully you'll just avoid these problems when your project goes on, and then hopefully at the end of the project everything goes smoothly and according to plan. So up next, we are also going to look at the sources of risk. So our first one is external. These are risks from regulatory or government sources. We also have internal too. These are scope changes, people issues, material availability, internal groups that would rather not see your project succeed, etc. We also have technical sources too. So these are new technologies or technologies that your resources have little experience with. We also have financial risk. So some companies bet their financial future on large projects that must succeed. And if they don't succeed, it could really spell trouble for the future of the company. Then lastly, we have legal risk as well. So these are projects that involve strict contracts and terms with heavy penalties if the project obligations are not met. So pulling from the Project Management Book of Knowledge, they have 6 risk management processes. So this is how we're going to end our presentation here. So the first one is plan risk management. This is the process of defining how to conduct risk management activities for a project. We also have identify risk. This is the process of determining which risks may affect the project and documenting their characteristics. We also have perform qualitative risk analysis. This is the process of prioritizing risks to further analysis or action by assessing and coming their profitability of occurrence and impact. Up next, we also have perform quantitative risk analysis too. This is the process of numerically analyzing the effects of identified risk on overall project objectives. 5 is plan risk responses. This is the process of developing options and actions to enhance opportunities and to reduce threats to project objectives. And then lastly, at number 6, we have monitor and control risks. So this is the process of implementing risk response plans, tracking identified risk, monitoring residual risk, identifying new risk, and then also evaluating risk processes throughout the project too. Alright, so that pretty much wraps up our project. Hopefully you learned a lot about project management. You learned kind of what it is, how to be successful with it, a couple things that can come with it too. We're group 2. This will be, of course, uploaded to the Blackboard for the discussion. So if you ever need to watch it back, it'll be right there for you as well. So thank you guys as well.